Previously, we looked at the K688 and also the AM8 from Fifine, which were both great options in terms of budget microphones. But today, we're going to be taking a look at the Fifine TANK3, and I'm super excited because I'm very curious to know if this is going to be a better option compared to the last two. First of all, to note, Fifine did send me this microphone for me to check out, and I do get to keep it afterwards. So I'm gonna put the paid promotion tag up here, but of course there's no money exchanged hands. They don't get to see the video before you guys do, so this video is entirely my own opinion. But before we get into the video, what comes in the box is the usual user's manual, a lengthy USB-C to USB-A cable, and of course, the microphone. Okay, so we currently have our TANK3 hooked up to our boom arm right here, and we're basically going to be looking at overall the build quality, the audio quality, and also going to be comparing it with a few other familiar faces that we have seen on this channel before. And before we start, I noticed that there's this random cord that's just hanging right here, so let's just fix that. Alright, so let's begin by first of all complimenting on the amazing build quality of this TANK3. The build quality of this microphone is actually very impressive. The entire microphone, well, I mean not the entire microphone, but most of the microphone is actually made out of metal. It makes the microphone feel very durable, very sturdy. There's really no issues with it whatsoever. It doesn't feel like any cheap metal either. If I push down on the grill, usually what happens is a lot of the less expensive microphones, they tend to collapse a little bit on the grill. But for this one, it feels very dense. There's no issues with that whatsoever. So props to that. But there are definitely a few plastic bits in here. Mostly it's just the knobs and the buttons. But overall, the rest of the microphone, actually, let me check the back here. Back is also metal. So the only plastic bits in this microphone is the knobs and the buttons. Everything else is metal and a pretty high quality metal. So build quality wise is actually very impressive, especially if we look at the last microphone we looked at from Fifine, the AM8. That one was rather plasticky, but this one is built out of a very solid metal construction. If we look over to this side of the microphone, we can see that this microphone is actually mounted on a half yoke mount. And that's pretty cool because we often see full yoke mounts, basically means they are mounted on both sides. On other microphones and even on the AM8, which we looked at last time, half yoke mount is neat because it looks very contemporary, looks very modern, but it also kind of opens up room on the other side to put other things. But first of all, let's go all the way down to the bottom of this half yoke mount. We can see that there's a knob here. This is the same knob as the one we got on the AM8. When we tighten it all the way down, the microphone still kind of moves around a little bit. So it's not like if you want to tighten the microphone so it doesn't move at all, you can't really do that here. But it's a plastic knob. I don't think it's gonna break or anything. And also there's really no knurling on this knob, which I would have liked. It would have made for a better and easier grip on this knob when you're tightening it down. But overall, it works fine and is not a huge complaint. If we go over to this side of the microphone, we can see that there's a few knobs on this side. Because of the half yoke mount design that we mentioned just earlier, it opens up the side of the microphone for other things, like for example, in this case, these knobs. So we have here the two knobs for input gain levels and also the headphone volume levels. This is for if you were to run this microphone using the USB input. Currently, we have the XLR, so these knobs really don't do anything for us at the moment. But it's actually rather nice to have the knobs on this side rather than on the, for example, the AM8, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. This one, they have it on the front, or the K688, which we first looked at for Fifine. That one, they have it on the back. So having it on the side makes it easier to adjust without having to move away from the front of the capsule, for example. So it's nice having that here. And if we look at the top of this microphone, we can actually see that there is a physical mute button on this microphone now, rather than a touch sensitive buttons like on the other two microphones we looked at in the past. There are pros and cons of each, but let's talk about that after I get out of this rather uncomfortable position. Okay, so that was a rather awkward angle, but let's talk a little bit more about the design of this microphone. So having the half yoke mount is nice because we actually open the door up for knobs on this side. Previously on the AM8, it's a little bit inconvenient to adjust some of the features, some of the settings. For example, the microphone is usually mounted this way, but if we want to, let's say, for example, adjust our gain, we have to flip it up this way, and then we can adjust the gain or the headphone volume and then flip it back down. If we look at the K688, which is a microphone that I actually quite like using as well, this one, the knobs are actually on the back side of the microphone. So if we want to adjust anything, we do have to like move our mouth away from the front of the capsule and spin it around and then adjust our settings and then, go back to actually recording. So it is a little bit more cumbersome and you really have to like, pause what you're doing, adjust your settings, and then come back to it. With the knobs on the right hand side, it actually makes it for an easier adjustment just by peeking around the corner, making your adjustments. And you can even do that while you're talking, while you're mid-recording in a podcast or whatnot. It makes it for a very easy adjustment. On the top, having that physical mute button is a pro and a con. Previously, I also mentioned that a touch capacitive button is nice in a way where when you touch it, you typically don't get a sound, but a physical button, you typically do. But with a physical button, you have a much more tactile feel because you can actually click a physical button. Now, honestly, I am kind of an old school kind of a person. I like to have, physical buttons and tactile buttons on all of my stuff. I like to be able to touch the buttons on a camera. I don't like using the touchscreen. I like the more tactile feel of having a physical button, but of course, we'll have to see if this button actually makes any sort of noise once we hit it while we're recording. Why don't we do that right now? Actually, no, I can't do that right now because I'm currently using XLR and not USB. So we'll do that later on when we test out the USB portion of this microphone. Another thing you'll notice is that the grill on this microphone is actually pretty long. It extends all the way back here basically to where the buttons are. Honestly, it actually looks kind of cool as well. I mean, it has a very modern feel in terms of a microphone design. But one thing to note about that is that when you have a grill this long, when you have buttons and knobs on the side over here, you really can't potentially put this on anything else other than the half yoke mount that they have here. So of course you can take off this mount, but then because there's things here, you can't put any sort of third-party shock mount on here. And if you haven't noticed, this half yoke mount isn't a shock mount per se. So if you do end up hearing any sort of background noises or like handling noises and whatnot, and you want to put it on a third-party shock mount, you can't really do that with this one. With other ones, like for example, like this Fifine K688, it comes with a shock mount, but if you want to use your own third-party one, for example, you can technically still unscrew the shock mount from this one and then put another one on there because there's nothing really blocking the way of this microphone. Like there's no buttons here or anything like that. So let's talk a little bit about specs for this microphone. So it has a cardioid pickup pattern, which basically means that the pickup pattern is right here in the front of the microphone and it won't hear anything, or it shouldn't hear anything from the sides or the back. You might still hear something because sound travels and it bounces off walls and there's echoes and whatnot, but in terms of the actual correct sound source, it is right here in the front of the microphone. And actually, I'm actually pretty impressed with the fall off of the sound as well, because usually when we do these tests where we kind of walk around the microphone and keep talking, I've noticed that the sound falls off very quickly immediately once I step over to around this side over here. It also has a USB and XLR combo jack input on this microphone, like all the other Fifine microphones we've looked at in the past. That's a nice thing because if you're starting out with recording, with podcasting, streaming, whatever the case might be, you might not actually have any sort of interface or mixers to plug this microphone in via XLR. So having that USB basically means this microphone is plug and play straight into the computer. And then when you upgrade to something, later on with an XLR port or an interface, for example, you can then use the XLR on this microphone and get better, richer audio quality without having to shell out more money to buy a different microphone. Okay, so let's do a plosive test. So Peter Piper pecked a pick of pickled peppers. Peter Piper went to the nearest Pizza Hut to get a Peking duck, Peking duck, Peking duck. So as you can see, there's actually no windscreen on this microphone. And as I'm reading on the website, supposedly there should be an internal windscreen inside to prevent plosives. And I can hear that it does reject plosives quite a bit, like puh, 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 puh. I mean, you can still hear it. If you do it intentional enough, puh, puh, puh. You can kind of hear it on any microphone. Puh, 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 puh. It's actually not bad. Like I've had microphones where it's been worse than this and the plosive rejection is worse. This one's actually not bad. But of course, because this microphone doesn't have a physical windscreen on it, you can technically take a third-party windscreen, which I don't have here, but you can technically take a third-party windscreen and put that over top and get even more plosive rejection if you so desire. Okay, so I had to stop the recording earlier because there was some guy outside mowing the lawn, and it was really distracting. Always happens when you start recording, hit the record button, things just always don't work out right. And as I hit this button right now again, I'm noticing that there's somebody upstairs. Sounds like they're playing with a basketball or something. So you might occasionally hear something bouncing around in the background. I don't know, man. I got to get this video done. Anyways, so I currently have it plugged in here with the K688. I'm going to be doing a handling noise rejection test. Basically, I'm going to be fondling the microphone. I'm going to be playing around with it, touching it here and there, and we can see how well it handles noise rejection. So keep in mind that this doesn't have a shock mount, so it may not work quite as well, but we'll see what happens, right? So I'm currently touching the microphone. So it's actually not bad. If I tap it, okay, the yoke mount has quite a bit of, resonance. It goes dung 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 dung, right? But if I tap the actual microphone, it really just falls off immediately. Tapping the boom arm obviously has a bit of resonance in there as well because this boom arm isn't very high quality. It's very hollow inside. So, but the microphone itself, it's actually very impressive. Like, this sounds like my Shure MV7. It sounds like my Rode Procaster. It is very good at rejecting handling noise on the microphone itself. I don't know what they're doing in there. There's probably some sort of like shock absorber on the inside of it. And also, I'm pretty sure the material also contributes to the noise rejection or the handling rejection of this microphone as well. Previously on the AM8, the handling rejection was horrible on that. We'll plug this in later and just give you guys an A/B test as well. But this one's very good. Okay, let's go over to the K688 just to, sort of do an A/B comparison. It's not bad as well, but if I were to tap it, this one's definitely a lot tinier and more pronounced. So it's very clear that maybe there's more, I don't know, it's more hollow on the inside. I don't know exactly. I'm not a microphone designer, but clearly something's different. They're doing something here to really absorb that handling noise. But as I mentioned, this yoke, it still, the sound still travels through the microphone. So don't tap the yoke. If you need to tap something, tap the microphone. Not sure why you need to tap it, but there you go. Okay, so right now I have it plugged into the AM8. I'm just currently holding it because I don't have another stand. I also don't have a recorder or an interface that can support more than 2 inputs. So unfortunately, I have to switch it back and forth constantly. But anyways, this is what the microphone sounds like if I tap the microphone. Yeah, so clearly because of this plastic design, this plastic shell of the AM8, you really do hear quite a bit of that handling noise. It gets transferred all into the microphone. Tapping it is quite bad. Tapping this one is very good. And while we have the microphone here, these two microphones plugged in, we might as well just do a quick A/B test of these two microphones. 1, 2, 3, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I'm trying to keep them as close to my mouth as I possibly can. Currently, both of these microphones are plugged into my Tascam DR100 Mark III. I've always been using this recorder. I think it's great. Also a recorder that has very little self noise. So if you do hear any like hiss in the background, that's not coming from the recorder, probably coming from the microphone, or maybe from the guy outside or whoever is playing basketball upstairs. But yeah, hopefully you can get a sense of what they sound like. Did I mention the gain level on the recorder? They're both on 35 decibels of gain. I believe they both require around 50 decibels of gain to run. So doesn't require a whole lot. It's not like the Shure SM7B days anymore. So yeah, at 35 decibels on the recorder, seems to be sounding just fine. I may boost it in post though, so we'll see what happens. So let's switch over to the K688 and do a comparison there. Okay, we have plugged it back into the K688 and I don't have to hold it anymore. And so that's nice. Really, there's not a huge difference in terms of the audio quality, at least from what I hear, between these microphones. I mean, in fact, I think these microphones sound so similar that I even went ahead and asked a few of my friends to see if they can hear a difference, and here are the results. So I'm gonna need your help. Can you put these on for me? I'm gonna play you 3 audio tracks, 3 different tracks recording using 3 different microphones. I want you to tell me which one you think sounds better, okay?
By the way, my name is Abo.
I need to speak English too.
Yes, please.
Sure, no problem. English is my best language.
He's just joking. He's pretending to be a Peter Chow. All right, so this is the first recording. Okay, this is the first one, all right?
Okay.
All right, and then this is the second one. That's the second one? Okay. It's okay, you don't need to comment.
It doesn't make a f***ing difference to me, okay? Can I swear? Okay.
Here's the third one.
Okay.
I think 1 or 3, they sound quite similar.
Okay.
Okay. I feel like I'm more familiar with the first set of audio tracks just because it reminds me a lot more of a typical streamer's audio track. So I might prefer that one.
It's no f***ing difference.
Well, which one do you think sounds better? Do you want to hear it again?
Should I avoid using the F word?
Yeah, so avoid using the F word. Which one sounds better? Oh my gosh, man. You're like derailing this video.
The second one is a bit more like higher pitch in a way.
Higher pitched, okay.
Yeah.
I like the second one the most.
Why?
It's more the surrounding of your sound is more in depth.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I think the first one is my preference.
I don't know. I can't really decide. I would say like 1 or 3.
Okay, avoid using the F word. They're all the same to me.
All right, thank you. So some of them do hear a difference, not all of them. For myself, I really don't hear that big of a difference. If anything, the slightest difference might be the AM8 is a little bit more pronounced in the higher frequencies. I think that this K688 is a little bit more bassier on the lower end frequencies. And I think this TANK3 is a little bit more in the neutral zone, in the middle. So it's like higher on the AM8, lower on the K688, and then this Fifine TANK3 is in the middle, more of a neutral sounding tone. But honestly, it's very, very minor, at least to my ears. Since that's the case, it's really more so about the design of the microphone and the build that you're really, choosing between when you're buying these microphones. I would say this, as I A/B these 2 microphones, I'm going to explain a little bit more about why you would choose the AM8, why you would choose the K688, and why the TANK3. So I think the AM8 is more the budget-friendly option. That one comes in at about $55 USD. This K688 is, I believe, $80 USD, and then this TANK3 is $90 USD. So if budget's tight, go for that one. But of course, you're gonna get a few sacrifices. Like for example, the build quality on that one is not quite as good, very plasticky, and yeah. So there's that you have to deal with. But the nice thing about it is that you do have lights. So if you are trying to run a very RGB setup with your streaming setup, for example, that one is gonna be probably your go-to. For this one, I think this one's more so for that SM7B sort of like recreation. I really do feel like this sounds like an SM7B. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't have an SM7B, but from hearing it in other recordings and stuff like that, this sounds similar. Like similar enough that like I feel like they're kind of trying to be an SM7B, this microphone. So if you're trying to go for that on a budget, this might be an option you might want to look at. But overall, I think between these two, I think this one would be the better buy. I mean, again, if you want that darker sound, this might be the one to get. But if you want a more neutral sound, I think this one overall delivers that better. And the nice thing about it is the overall build and the design, I think, is also a little bit better on this one. Okay, so I have flipped the camera over to this side, which means that we're going to be testing out the USB aspect of this microphone. Currently, I have it plugged in via USB into the computer, and also I have the headphone plugged into the headphone jack in the back for direct monitoring. And also, as I noticed, as I have the camera angle here, I'm noticing that the microphone is actually pretty small, right? Like it's actually not that, the profile, the silhouette of it is actually pretty small. So if you have scenarios where you kind of don't want to cover the face, this could be a good option as well. One thing I do want to note as I'm listening to this is that this fixed a problem that I've noticed on the previous two microphones, the K688 and also the AM8. When I tested those microphones, when I had it plugged into the USB, I've noticed that the volume knob, even though I've cranked it all the way up, my headphones were very quiet. Now on this one, it sounds perfectly fine. I'm using the same headphones as I did back then, and I currently have it cranked all the way up to the maximum. I wouldn't say it's like loud, but it's definitely at a nominal level, at an audible level that I'm comfortable with, and I can hear myself well. Previously, I felt like it was very, very soft and quiet. At least they fixed that, so that's a good thing. That's a good sign. Let's test out this mute button, this physical mute button. As I mentioned, you might hear a sound as I mute myself. Let's hear if that's actually the case. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and mute. Did you hear me? You didn't hear me, did you? But did you hear the mute button as I clicked it? I heard it. I'm not sure if you guys heard it. One thing to note as well is that this button is actually quite loose. It's quite rattly in there. It's not like a stiff button. And so the moment you put your finger on it, you can hear something. At least I can hear it. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but we'll see what happens as I listen to this recording after. As I mentioned, touch sensitive button is nice because they're mostly silent. Physical button is nice because they're tactile. You can feel it without actually looking at it, but you might actually get a little bit of a sound. So it depends on your scenario. If you're using it for a Zoom call, honestly, no big deal. Who's going to really care if they hear like a little click? If you're recording a podcast, this might be something that you might need to be aware of. As your guest, for example, needs to cough or sneeze, they might hit the button, and then afterwards, you might get a little click in your recording. You might need to cut it out or do something about it. Just something to be aware of. But overall, as I'm listening to this through my headphones, I think the audio sounds great through the USB. I don't really have any complaints here. I'm definitely, the XLR is more, it sounds fuller, but I don't really hear a huge difference or huge issue with this audio via the USB. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think it sounds good or not? I'm going to have to stop this and listen back to it to really get a good idea. But so far, doesn't seem too bad. And that's my thoughts on the Fifine TANK3. Overall, you can definitely see Fifine's improvements over the years with their dynamic microphones, and this one definitely has a good mix of build quality, design, and also audio as well. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Do you guys think this microphone sounds good? Do you think it sounds horrible? I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. My name is Somebody, and until next time, bye-bye.